Today's episode was recorded at the Houston Museum of Natural Science on May 27, 2026. Be sure to check out our other episodes, including one with Sheila E. on rhythm neuroscience. Don't forget to click subscribe, and please rate the show on your favorite podcast platform.
Musical training, it's been found to decrease your risk of developing any type of cognitive impairment, including dementia, Alzheimer's, by 64% in the reduction, even if you take up the instrument as an adult.
Tell me something good. Oh, tell me, baby, tell me that you love me. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Welcome to Sing for Science, the show where musicians and scientists talk about music and science. I'm your host, Matt White. Each week we'll talk about a song by our guest artist and how it connects with our guest scientist's area of expertise. Tonight, we'll be speaking with 11-time Grammy Award winner and pop music icon, Chaka Khan. Chaka first rose to fame in the 1970s as the lead singer of the band Rufus, whose breakout hit, Tell Me Something Good, helped define the sound of funk and soul for a generation. Over the 5 decades since, Chaka has released 23 studio albums, sold over 70 million records, and collaborated with artists ranging from Prince and Miles Davis to Ariana Grande and Sia. Also joining us is MD Anderson neurosurgery assistant professor, concert pianist, and founder and director of their music and medicine program, Dr. May Ray. Dr. Ray is a pioneer in the field of music medicine and leads large-scale clinical trials researching how music impacts stress, recovery, cognition, and overall brain health. Since 2023, May has also organized more than 50 free in-hospital concerts featuring Grammy-winning artists for patients, caregivers, and physicians alike. The title of this week's episode on the podcast is Tell Me Something Good, investigating how music can transform the brain and body. Please help me give a warm welcome to Chaka Khan and Dr. May Ray.
Hi, how y'all doing? Well, thank you for coming out tonight.
So, to start, I just want to say that the origin story, Tell Me Something Good, falls under the category of rock and roll mythology to me. Would you be so kind as to share it with the audience? The origin story, how Stevie introduced the song.
He came to the studio. He played a song, and I asked him, I didn't like it. And so I asked him, I said, do you have anything else? He said, you don't like that song? I said, no. So he said, what's your birth sign? I said, Aries. Aries Pisces, I'm on the cusp. So he said, oh, I know, I got you. And then he started playing, like, waka, 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 waka. I said, oh, okay. That'll work. So that's how Tell Me Something Good came about. And I've been singing that almost since the beginning of my career, very close to the beginning of my career. I mean, it's like singing Mary Had a Little Lamb over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. I appreciate how everybody else feels about it. It's cool. But I'm so certain that that's not the only song everybody listens to. Now, is it? Yeah, so.
I'm assuming you know what he meant when he connected that song to your being an Aries. I don't know what that means.
Well, I think that he was referring more to the fact that I said, do you have something else?
Okay. Well, thank you for being selective, because I love that song.
I'm so happy you like that song.
Dr. Ray, from a neuroscience standpoint, what's to account for this song being so beloved by so many of us?
So our brain is a living paradox. So everybody noticed the song starts with a very distinct syncopated rhythm. So we have pa, cha, cha. So now imagine if that offbeat. So if instead of having that, we just have without any of that, then you don't have the same groove. So on the neuroscience side, so the brain is a paradox in the way that it loves to make predictions. So it loves to predict future events. They like surprises as well. So the novelty is very stimulating. So the syncopated rhythm adds to that spice in a very nuanced and more subtle way. So in terms of structurally, this type of very activating and relatively steady, but very strong rhythm. Yeah, exactly. It triggers a very primal area in our brain called, so includes the regions such as the cerebellum, the basal ganglia, and those regions are responsible for survival and reproduction. So a lot of the functional, the more primitive needs. So they literally, they situate more at the bottom.
You mean the grunting part?
And the other surprise is that when I first heard the song, I remember the bass line, it starts off the descending bass line, and midway in the song, it converts into ascending, so it gets inverted into the ascending bass line. So I definitely felt the goosebumps and the dopamine hit. So of course, when your voice came on, that's where the limbic system, the emotional center in our brain gets very, very happy and very, very active. So it kind of taps into both the more primitive part of the brain, but also the emotional, the higher cognition as well. That's why it's so catchy and very powerful and very global in terms of brain activation.
I gotta ask, what happens when people try and clap along with this song?
I must say, I haven't witnessed anybody clapping.
Okay, yeah.
I've seen them doing lots of other things to the song without clapping.
They're smart. We did an episode with Sheila E. and a rhythm neuroscientist who explained to me that rhythm is processed in the motor cortex in the brain.
And the premotor as well.
Right.
And it's also in the reptilian part of the brain. Oh. So it's not a bad word. It sounds. But it's the more primitive part. So actually, the more essential part of the brain that's tied to survival. So evolutionarily and anthropologically, if we look back to the beginning of mankind, so the auditory sense was actually the very first one. Also, we can look at the development of a fetus in utero. So the auditory sense is the first one to fully mature, and it is almost completely mature in the last trimester. So you see, and also it's the last sense to go to sleep at night, and it's the first one to wake up in the morning. So and then beyond that will be the olfactory. So the smell is next. Everything, sight, touch. If we think about the hunter-gatherer days, right?
Yeah,
how essential it is. A lot of them for survival, right? Nocturnals, being able to hear the footsteps of a predator or hear the cry of a baby. Mm-hmm. So those are really essential human survival skills.
That answer your question?
Yeah, it sure did. So when we're talking about music and medicine, and we're talking about targeting both the body and the brain, could you give the audience sort of a general primer on your approach?
Sure. So in understandable terms, if you think of music as a very heterogeneous drug, right, that we're trying, and it's dose dependent, and it is very outcome specific. So we would design very, very different playlists for someone that's mild to moderate, cognitively impaired. where we might want to stimulate rather than downregulate. Compared to a lot of the critical care cohorts I work with and a lot of the clinical trials at MD Anderson, they're designed to reduce the human stress response just by enhancing and optimizing the acoustic manner of care. And also at the same time, on providing a better environment for example, the surgeons that are operating on these patients as well. So I'll give you an example of one of the studies that's very innovative. We are looking at intraoperatively. So when neurosurgeons are performing brain surgeries, sometimes these are awake craniotomies where the patients may be require, it's a very exerting, demanding process. They require to stay awake. So they get put under, then they get woken up in the middle of a surgery where they may have to stay vigilant for the next 6 to 7 hours while knowingly they know the surgeon is operating, is resecting their tumor. So that imagine just psychologically and in terms of mood and anxiety. So for that, we are simultaneously measuring the effects on the surgeons as well. So surgeons are going to be wearing wearables. So we track their body temperature, respiratory rate, heartbeat, along with tracking the patients in a very quantitative way. So the earliest stage of that trial, where we looked at preoperative surgical patients, we're seeing a very promising above 30% reduction in serum level cortisol from 30 minutes of intervention to some of the music I'll demo later. So if you compare that to a typical effect size of an FDA-approved drug that's on the market, that is a tremendous effect size. That is, this is not to devalue any of the medications that are life-saving, but it should definitely be harnessed much more broadly and by different institutions.
Is that the same part of the brain, that one of the oldest parts of the brain we're talking
That's
about?
actually a little bit different.
The lizard part?
So that's more the rhythmic, the very activating music, with drumming and with the syncopated beats. So the classical music, actually, they depending on, again, lots of factors, familiarity, of course, and usually we avoid, specifically for, if the goal is to, I mentioned, to reduce the heart rate, lower blood pressure, reduce the need for other interventions, is this kind of music would rest between 60 to 80 beats per minute. So not above 120 like a lot of the techno or AC/DC. A lot of surgeons still play them. And I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues. They are convinced that these have no impact on surgical performance in the OR. But just about 10 days ago, there was a paper that came out in Nature that highlighted that even when patients are under GA, this was something also I always talk about in my grant runs. Even when patients are under general anesthesia, our brain does respond to external acoustic stimuli. So that publication showed that it can interact with the environment and respond to verbal cues, even when it's under.
I've heard that singing in community in a chorus can actually, there's a lot of research surrounding on that, its capacity to regulate emotion and reduce cortisol as well. Like there's a lot of research, the importance of singing in a group together.
I can't even tell you what it's called. The feeling that I had when I did sing, in the choir, and how it affected me. But it is
Incredibly powerful.
It's powerful stuff. Yes, it is. Yes.
So on the neuro side, now we're conducting live experiments during our in-hospital concerts. I think one of my collaborators here from University of Houston, where we are looking at specifically brain synchrony in audience members like you.
Why is using live music a preferred mode of delivery when you're conducting your research and collecting data?
So in the existing literature, a few of the studies, not in critical care cohorts, more in less stringent environments or closed laboratory settings, they found that live music entrains the brain more powerfully. So on the rhythmic side, and also in terms of entraining your heart rate to the pulse, into the tempo of the music, so that entrainment happens more efficiently with live music. And additionally, the reduction in, if we're looking at biomarker changes, and also neurotransmitter releases, it's more profound with live music. This is something that's so intuitive, right, for us musicians, but it's still great. The scientist in me, we want to quantify that. So that's my rationale for developing this new concert series at MD Anderson, where we bring live music directly to patients. They come in wheelchairs, they have their chemo pole with their caregivers. So we bring them directly to the front line, so they don't have to go to Jones Hall to go to a world-class concert. So the impact is definitely different.
I want to ask you, Chaka, to speak to your experience making live music, and because so few people on this planet know what it's like to be a single voice with tens of thousands of people receiving you. How do you describe that interchange?
I don't know if there's any way of really explaining that and conveying that. First of all, I mean, in the beginning of my career, I was, petrified. Not because there were so many people watching what I was doing, and I felt like, oh dear, what if I mess up? It wasn't that. It was more like, why am I doing this? And fear is so unique unto the individual. So I went to the conversation with Chick Corea, and we were doing a big outdoor festival, and I was getting ready to go on stage. And still, I have moments where I dry heave. Still. And the reasons are fear of not pleasing everybody. Chick said to me, he said, you have to look at the people like an ocean, like a large body of water. If you touch the ocean with your finger, you touch the entire ocean. And that's in singing, that's in anything. When you touch it, you touch it all. And there's nothing wrong with that.
And I resonate so much with what you said, Chaka, about the feeling of vulnerability in front of an open, a large crowd. I have not performed for as many people in one setting as you have, but I think that feeling of vulnerability is so meaningful and so palpable for a lot of the audience members. And that's what makes the real-time live art making so special. And sometimes musicians, we are our own harshest critics, always, right? Amen. But especially if we're talking about children or populations, they may be experiencing some disorder of the system. So that vulnerability and even a flawed, what we consider to be a flawed state, could be so therapeutic. If you look at the human as a system, right? A lot of, look at heart rate variability. So I researched that. That's one of the critical indicators of a person's overall wellness. So during the COVID pandemic, 2 days before 48 hours before someone was about to come down with COVID symptoms, their HRV will drop as much as 40%. But music has a profound way of impacting HRV. So what is heart rate variability? It's not perfect. It's actually the variance, right? So between adjacent heartbeats, there are a lot of little and actually not so subtle variance. So that actually makes someone more resilient and more robust, more healthier. So we may consider, this beat came in a microsecond too late. But for the listener, that makes it even more memorable and more special.
May, do you want to speak to why classical music is the preferred mode of delivery with what you do?
It's not all classical music. This is really a huge misunderstanding. Classical music is the most heterogeneous genre, and I will demonstrate some of that towards the end of our conversation, where within the same piece, even if we have a 3-minute long Chopin nocturne or a movement of a sonata from Schubert, and it may start very calmly, and then it may have a very eruptive climax. But if you were trying to entrain the system as a whole, right, in let's say an ICU setting, where really everything is so fragile and very critical, and if you have a mechanically ventilated patient and you want to stabilize the hemodynamic system, and stabilize the respiratory rate, we definitely would want to avoid music that are very activating.
Music we're just talking about
right.
is written, and the written note is the king. And I find that to be, today I still find it, I don't like it.
Too rigid.
Too restrictive.
Too strict, too restricted, too rigid, too all of that. And you know, and music is like love. You can't write down an orgasm. I hate to put it like that, but I don't really hate to put it like that because that's the only thing I can think of.
I would
Hard to
defer
describe.
on that comment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of composers, like some Rachmaninoff, I recently performed. Some audience members, they had never attended that. They said that was very acoustically orgasmic. So, in the way a climax is built specifically in some of this romantic literature, it's very powerful, and you will have a much longer narrative arc. It's kind of like reading War and Peace versus a short story, or watching Lord of the Rings versus an episode of Friends. A lot of the classical literature, this is not to disparage one genre or another, but sometimes we need that immersive, longer, more sustained, attentionally more sustained narrative arc for therapeutic purposes. And it's especially this day and age, everyone is that we just want very quick dopamine hits, these 6-second TikTok videos. And so we definitely have, as a society, we have developed shorter attention spans. It was ADHD as well, and a lot of the...
Well, I don't have it.
Of course.
And we, as far as I can tell, we didn't have it.
I'd like to take us on a little bit of a departure. And so for those of us who aren't familiar with your pre-Rufus career, could you talk a little bit about this group, Shades of Black?
Okay. No, really, this is like, I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. And we sang Miriam Makeba, Lena Mbulu, Hume and we sang a lot of African songs. And we didn't know what we were singing about, except Wave Me Away about the lion. You know, we just...
It would seem to me that you wouldn't have, you learn these songs phonetically, but because of the moment, the context that this group was singing in, that moment, and membership in the Panthers and everything that was happening in Chicago at that time, I would imagine that you wouldn't have to know what each word meant, that you're transmitting a meaning.
I feel like that right now. There was a song that we did by Lena Mbulu, and it was called Shia Kemaru, which meant, loosely, come home. He went out on, her husband went out to kill a lion. Shia Kemaru. It was much higher. Shia Kemaru. Kema Heapulana Arubara Kishapuna.
Wait, that was 60 years ago and that's still in your head?
Easy.
Damn.
Yes.
So, May, what's to account for this? Because I think what we're talking about here is that music...
The brain holding on to stuff.
Well, there's that. There's also that music is this universal language, right? And it has these, whether you know the words or not, especially in this instance. And I think that's a profound example of this. How do you describe that music can be viewed through this lens, that it's a universal nonverbal language?
It's high communication.
Very high.
High vibe.
That's
But
awesome.
also very, very fundamental, starting from in utero and for animals as well. Anybody has read about the dogs that are prone to anxiety as well.
Right.
They also, there's a group of Japanese scientists, they've studied playing operas in a vineyard, and apparently the wine came out tasting better that year.
Yeah.
So I think we're really underestimating how much the vibrations from the environment, sound waves, can impact us. But on the neural side, music stimulation, music as an acoustic stimulation is really one of the only and wholesome human endeavors that has been found over and over, with neuroimaging studies and with EEG, fMRI, and also PET scans where they're tracking neurotransmitter releases to engage every critical region in the brain. So it's a whole brain exercise. And so, for example, in patients that suffer a stroke in recovery, before they are able to perform any work with a physical therapist or even converse with a music therapist. If you start playing music to them, that's emotionally relevant. You bring oxygenated blood flow to these critical areas, and you're establishing new connections in those early days. And in, of course, NICU babies, right, and in epilepsy. So their uses are, the practical and the clinical applications are really vast. So it's very powerful on the physiological front and also on the neurological front, and of course on psycho-emotional, which we have understood for a long time.
And specifically, can you talk a little bit about how you might use music as medicine to help the neurodivergent population?
So I have a problem with sometimes the word neurodivergent associated with kind of a disease cohort, right? That this group of kids that they're deficient in some ways, but of course that's the clinical term. But instead of thinking they're deficient in a lot of the areas, many of them are hyper talented. They're overachievers in many other, especially on the creativity side. You think of Williams syndrome; those children are exceptionally musical. And with autism, these kids, they used to, 2 decades ago, the clinicians thought the empathy will be lower, the sensitivity, the emotional sensitivity will be lower. And that turned out not to be true. Many of them are actually hypersensitive. So it's an overstimulation of the system that causes them to shut down. And so they get overstimulated very, very easily. And with ADHD, for example, they have difficulty sustaining activity that may not offer short-term rewards, right, or something that's very, in a more stimulating way, right? So music, in the sense, if you think of cultivating that habit, whether it's someone that has that's hyperactive, has trouble focusing, and if we let that child, there are a few things you could do. First of all, in getting up, transitions are hard for a lot of these children. Transitions are hard for my own kids, and they haven't been diagnosed with me. Transitions are hard for adults as well. But if we enhance the acoustic environment with some sound and music, or even nature sound that's consistent and predictable, it can really soothe the so-called savage beast, that our hyperactive amygdala, our nervous system that's overreacting to, everything is so overstimulating in this day and age. But if you compare that to the 19th century, the 18th century, evolutionarily, this development really surpassed what we could take as a being, and I feel overstimulated all the time as well. So on the listening side, just immersive listening side, we could do a lot in the classrooms. There are studies showing, if we're trying to unify the energy of a group of children, right? Instead of the teacher yelling, "Everybody quiet," you put on music that the children may find interesting, can relate to, and then you play for a couple of minutes, and then you turn it off, and everybody is quiet, and you don't have to work very hard to achieve that equilibrium. And especially on the education side, on musical creativity engagement, if we, in terms of teaching musical training, musical skills, practicing the piano, the violin, the guitar, the benefits are so longitudinal. So there's a study I love to highlight. It's in pairs of twins that musical training, it's been found to decrease your risk of developing any type of cognitive impairment, including dementia, Alzheimer's, by 64% in the reduction, even if you take up the instrument as an adult. So that there is very few or no other intervention that is so demanding and rewarding also.
Yeah.
So that's in terms of creating changes. That's something we should be focusing on.
Yeah.
Before, we're about to transition to May's performance on the piano. But before we do, Chaka, could you speak a little bit about your experience with your nephew? Because I know that that's so central to your foundation's mission, but I'm curious about music, your relationship with him and music and him, what you've observed.
He loves music. He's 26, 27, 28 already. He's still a baby in my eyes. And he's nonverbal, but he's verbal when he wants to be. He's very clever. He sings like Nat King Cole. Unbelievable. He remembers the words, he knows all the words, You just gotta like coax him a little bit to sing with you, and he's there. Wow. He's very, very smart and sneaky. He gets what he wants. He figures it out. You know, he has a love for candy and sweets, and many times, you know, I hide candy and stuff from him in my room. He knows exactly where to go, and he goes to get it. And I have to, you know, cuss him out, you know, for going in my room. You know, I just treat him like a regular dude. And we found out he had autism before it even existed. Before anybody knew it existed. It didn't exist. He woke up one morning. He was what, a year old or 6 months? You're 3 years old? Oh my God, I keep thinking he's just a baby. I'm still there. Okay, he was 3 years old. He was just beginning to really talk. Well, I just taught him the word chandelier. And he's on my hip, and we were going up an escalator, talking about the chandelier. The next morning, he woke up, and he was gone. That is some of the scariest shit in the world. It's so scary. And we didn't know what it was. So imagine, we were like freaking out. I'm devastated at the ratio is now, how kids, you know, God, it's just insane.
1 in 31.
Yes, it's insane. And we are killing our children with the foods, with the attitudes. If I was a little more nuts, I'd be doing something really radical about it. You know, if I didn't have grandbabies and great-grandbabies that I needed to see grow up.
Well, the work you're doing with the foundation is a good start. Thank you.
All babies are my babies.
So we are in for a true treat in that May is going to perform. May is a world-class pianist. While she's setting up, I think we're going to grab that chair off. Yeah.
The reason classical music could be so beautiful sometimes is it really integrates both familiarity and novelty. So try to listen for the recurrent theme and for any other patterns, elements that you may recognize.
Everybody give it up for Dr. May Ray. You have been a tremendous audience. Our special guest of honor would like to come and say goodnight to all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chaka Khan.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. Let's have another hand. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Be sure to stay up to date with all things Chaka by visiting her website, chakakhan.com, and following her on social media at Chaka Khan. And to learn more about the work her foundation is doing, you can visit chakakhanfoundation.org. You can stay up to date with Dr. Ray by following her on social media at May Ray Piano and visiting MD Anderson's website, mdanderson.org. Sing for Science is co-produced by Talkhouse and made possible in part by a grant from the Simons Foundation. Our music is by Panorama. Social media director and video editor is Sina Yusevzadeh. Location recording by John Danielson, and our digital producer is Keenan Cush. Special thanks to Kimball Dermis, Ruth Carness, the Chaka Khan Foundation, and MD Anderson for helping make today's episode possible. If you like Sing for Science, the best way you can support us is to give us a review, tell a friend about the show, and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. For more information, please visit singforscience.org and follow us on social media at Sing for Science. Thanks for listening.